They said the galaxy had matured, that war was a relic, a primitive instinct eradicated by civilization's march across the stars. Every major empire signed the Galactic Armistice, a pact that banned interstellar warfare, restricted military development, and replaced conflict with commerce and diplomacy. For 3 centuries, peace reigned, not because all agreed, but because all feared what would happen if peace failed. Humanity arrived late. By the time Earth earned a seat in the Galactic Council, the rules were already written. Humans read them, nodded, and signed. The rest of the galaxy scoffed at how easily they agreed. Species who had bled for peace couldn't believe Earth would accept the treaty without debate. The assumption was instant. Humans were afraid of war. They weren't feared. Not like the Jarnathi, who had once glassed 5 worlds in a single cycle. Not like the Thessalans, who controlled half a sector before they were forced into disarmament. Humanity came quietly, wearing suits and smiles, offering trade routes and data-sharing protocols. They requested nothing. They demanded nothing. They didn't even ask for reparations from the wars they hadn't fought. They were called many things: naive, inexperienced, overconfident. But most often they were called coward. Not openly, not by the ambassadors and delegate, but in private channels, over drinks in orbital lounges and in the darker corners of the extranet, the consensus formed. Humans were smart, but soft. Fast, but fragile. They had no scars. No wounds. No history worth fearing. They had a fleet, yes. 10,000 ships registered under the Interstellar Navigation Treaty. None were warships. All were labeled as exploratory, scientific, or civilian. Their colonies were open, their systems lightly defended. And still, they thrived. No one could understand it. No standing army, no planetary defense grids worth noting, and yet not a single attack, not a single breach. Some believed humans were protected by the Council. Others thought they paid for unseen mercenaries to keep predators away. A few even speculated they had powerful allies hidden in the shadows. But most believed something simpler. Humans had never been tested. The galaxy had grown complacent. If war returned, humanity would be the first to fall. That assumption was the seed of the Dominion's arrogance. The Jarnathi, once kneeling at the edge of extinction, had rebuilt in secret. They never truly disarmed. Their weapons went underground, their factories retooled under civilian covers. Their warlords became politicians. Their generals became CEOs. And behind the mask of compliance, the Dominion sharpened its claws. They started small, harassing freighters along trade routes, intercepting signals, manipulating markets. When no one responded, they escalated. They annexed 3 minor systems under the guise of economic collapse. The Council debated, argued, delayed. When the Thessalans issued a formal warning, the Dominion laughed in their faces. They knew the rules. They knew no one would strike first. That was the brilliance of the armistice. It paralyzed everyone equally. But the Dominion didn't want equal. They wanted dominance. So they chose a target. Not a rival empire. Not a powerful system. They chose a human colony. Hestara Prime. Population, 1.3 million. Mostly agricultural. No visible defenses. No military presence. Just another quiet human world spinning under its yellow sun. The perfect bait. They sent a raiding fleet under a false flag, posing as rogue pirates. Their goal wasn't conquest. It was humiliation. They wanted to prove the humans were as weak as they seemed. What happened next was never publicly disclosed. But the details leaked. First came the jamming. Hestara's transmissions vanished. The Council assumed it was solar interference. Then came silence from the nearby human outpost at Delker Station. Hours later, Dominion ships returned, damaged but intact. Their crews celebrated in private. Footage was shared. Civilians executed. Fields burning. A child's toy crushed beneath a soldier's boot. They expected outrage. They expected fury. They expected humanity to scream for justice. Instead, the humans went quiet. No official statement. No retaliatory strikes. Just a single transmission, sent across secured diplomatic channels, received by every council representative and broadcast once before being sealed. The treaty no longer applies. That was it. 5 words. No threats. No accusations. No emotion. The council went into emergency session. The Dominion laughed again. They called it a bluff. Called humans dramatic. One ambassador joked that Earth should hire better screenwriters. But then the Sol system closed. No traffic in. No traffic out. All human embassies across the galaxy received an identical message. Return immediately. Human diplomats vanished overnight. Their colonies went dark. Trading outposts shut down. Science stations evacuated. Every known human fleet disappeared from the registers. At first, no one understood. Then, telescopes from neighboring systems caught the movement. Ships leaving the asteroid belt. Black vessels, matte, angular, undetectable by standard sensors, emerging from shadows. They didn't match any known human design. They didn't match any known design, period. The fleets didn't announce themselves. They didn't request clearance. They didn't transmit beacons. They simply moved, silent, organized, precise. Rumors exploded. Some said Earth had hidden its military in plain sight. Others whispered about secret artificial intelligences or ancient war machines buried beneath Luna's crust. But all agreed on one point: those were not science vessels. The Dominion still refused to believe. Their High Marshal made a public speech mocking the humans, called them theatrical, claimed they were staging an elaborate show to scare children. He promised to deliver peace through strength. He promised that if Earth sent ships, the Dominion would return them as debris. 3 days later, the Dominion's primary shipyard went dark. Not damaged. Not attacked. Gone. Every orbital facility, every drydock, every anchored vessel, atomized. Observers on the nearest moon reported seeing a flash of light, then nothing. When probes arrived, all they found was glass and silence. No one claimed responsibility. No human ship was seen. No weapon was recorded. Just absence. The Council demanded answers. Earth didn't reply. The Dominion sent out patrols. 2 fleets vanished. A third limped back, engines melted, crews comatose from neural feedback. No explanation. No survivors who remembered more than a flash of motion and a cold, artificial voice whispering, "This is your warning." The Council convened again, this time in fear. Some demanded sanctions. Some begged for contact. But no one dared move against Earth. Not anymore. Then came the second strike. A Dominion fortress world. Khazar 9. Population, 4 million. Fortified for over a century. Orbiting a neutron-rich planet with layered magnetic defenses, planetary cannons, and a standing army of 500,000. It fell in 7 minutes. Survivors, few as they were, spoke of black shapes tearing through the sky. No sound. No heat. Just impact and annihilation. Orbital defenses failed instantly. Ground forces were cut down before they could arm themselves. Even the planetary shield collapsed without resistance. No demands were made. No territory taken. No banner raised. The humans arrived, dismantled the infrastructure of war, and vanished. This time there was no laughter. They thought they had seen the worst. They thought the destruction of Khazar 9 was the extent of human wrath. A warning, not a campaign. A retaliation, not a war. They were wrong. Humanity hadn't begun fighting. It had only stopped watching. The galaxy still didn't know where the human fleets had come from. Their registries were blank. Their designs unfamiliar. No empire recognized their technology. When scanned, their ships returned no data. Not stealth-coded, absent. They absorbed signal, light, magnetic. They did not respond to hails. They did not reply to threats. They were invisible until they chose not to be. The Dominion was the first to test them openly. 3 capital fleets assembled in retaliation. 30,000 ships, retrofitted with everything the Dominion had illegally stockpiled. They armed nuclear-tipped railguns, planetary torches, kinetic harpoons. They believed numbers would win. They believed strength still meant something. The fleets never arrived. Not a single vessel returned. Long-range sensors caught a distortion along the travel route. No explosion. No debris. No wreckage. Just absence. 78,000 lives lost in transit. No contact. No survivors. The Council demanded a full human explanation. There was none. But in the solar system once occupied by the Dominion Fleet Command, new satellites began broadcasting a phrase on loop. "You sent steel." We answered with silence. Empires began revising their military doctrines overnight. Recruitment froze. Weapon production paused. Even war games were halted. The unspoken truth had become too loud to ignore. The humans were not improvising. They were executing a plan. Next came the precision strike. No more bombastic displays. No more orbital glassing. Instead, humanity began carving through the Dominion's infrastructure with surgical efficiency. Communications hubs, fuel refineries, drone factories, each blinked out of existence in carefully timed intervals. Nothing collateral. No civilian targets. Just the nervous system of an empire being disabled one nerve at a time. In each location, after the strike, a signal was left behind. This is not war. This is correction. The Dominion began to collapse internally. Fear spread faster than resistance. Loyalist factions surrendered entire sectors without a fight. Military governors defected, hoping to survive the purge. One planetary admiral detonated his own command center rather than risk human contact. Still, humanity said nothing. No peace terms. No invasion. No claim of conquest. They erased the means for violence, then left the ashes untouched. By the third week, the Council could no longer deny the truth. Humanity had not been quiet because it lacked the ability. It had been quiet because it had not been provoked. Its silence had been restraint. The Thessalons, once proud of their brutal past, quietly recalled their veteran fleets from border patrol. The Ergen Syndicate decommissioned half its covert operations. One by one, the galaxy's most aggressive powers began issuing public statements in support of peace, neutrality, and non-alignment. It was too late. Humanity had moved beyond deterrence. On the fourth week, they arrived at the Dominion's new capital, shifted to a fortress world orbiting a red supergiant. It was considered impenetrable, a ring of defensive moons, orbital mines, shielded bunkers, 22 million troops, 28 planetary defense grids, 3 overlapping sky cannons. It lasted 4 minutes. No orbital descent. No troop deployment. The command AI shut itself down after detecting over 3,000 simultaneous weapon locks it could not trace. Atmospheric shielding collapsed without damage. The planetary core destabilized, not detonated, collapsed. The world's surface fell inward, folding itself into molten quiet. Above the dying planet, a signal repeated in every known galactic language. There will be no second warning. No one moved against Earth again. The galaxy began reviewing its own intelligence archive. Questions arose. How had humanity built these fleets? Where had they hidden them? Who built the weapons, the algorithms, the command systems? The answers were buried in Earth's history. Most had never looked closely. Now they did. They found records of the human silence doctrine, a doctrine that outlawed open warfare after the last Earth conflict. A war that spanned 6 generations. In that time, humanity had mastered war so completely that they outlawed it internally. Not by idealism. By necessity. They had watched the oceans boil. Watched the skies blacken. Watched cities turn to memory under firestorms too efficient to resist. The final war did not end with a treaty. It ended because no side was left to continue. What rose from the ashes was not a civilization. It was a commitment. Never again. They dismantled their weapons. Not out of weakness. Out of fear of themselves. But they did not forget. They buried their machines. Encased them in satellites. distributed them in asteroid fields, locked them behind quantum seals, encrypted with keys that required unanimous planetary authorization to unlock. The day Hestara Prime fell, those keys turned. The fleets had not been built in secret. They had always been there. The galaxy had simply failed to understand humanity's patience. That patience was gone now. As the Dominion fractured, other species rushed to denounce the violence. Some accused humanity of hypocrisy, using war to end war. But no one acted. No one sent fleets. No one dared intercept. They all remembered the precision, the coldness, the silence. They remembered that the humans hadn't even broadcast threat. They hadn't called for alliances. They hadn't justified anything. They had simply begun. The most feared moment in any war is not the first shot. It is the moment you realize the other side was never preparing. They were waiting. In private, council members began requesting direct contact with Earth's representative. Messages went unanswered. Earth's embassies remained sealed. Human colonies were still operational, but only under automated protocols. No human voices. Just systems running smoothly, monitored by quiet eyes. Eventually, a signal was received. One line. Disarmament begins with clarity. No one understood. Until the first non-human war factory detonated itself from within. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't attack. It was programming. Hidden code, seeded into Dominion infrastructure over decades, activated the moment it detected human military response. The virus had been planted during trade deals, diplomatic exchanges, and tech-sharing initiative. The humans hadn't needed spies. They had simply handed out gifts with triggers. Other nations began scanning their own systems. One by one, they found similar anomalies, routines, failsafes, devices that had never activated, until now. Humanity had been preparing for decades, quietly, gently, not for war, for justice. They had never sought conquest. Their fleets didn't patrol. Their soldiers didn't occupy. Their weapons didn't linger. They arrived. They erased. They left. Not a war machine. A scalpel. And still, no words. No public declaration. No ambassador to blame. Just motion, action, consequence. Across the stars, the phrase began to take root. Afraid of war? No. They just remember it too well. On broadcast forums, they began to study humanity not through dialogue, but through aftermath. The galaxy had long prided itself on intellect, on diplomacy, on stability won through stagnation. And yet in 47 days, all those values bent to the will of a species that had not spoken a single demand. Humanity had left, but its shadow remained. Every empire, union, and council convened in private, not to punish the humans, to understand how they'd missed it. They dissected every record of Earth's rise, expecting to find missing pieces, something skipped in the assessment. But Earth's early development was well documented. Primitive, chaotic, loud. The humans had fought themselves more than any species recorded. They didn't just war, they innovated inside it. New strategies, new tools, faster than any containment could match. The brutality wasn't random. It was methodical. They didn't evolve despite war. They evolved through it. What stunned the analysts wasn't the carnage. It was the efficiency. Every recorded war ended in either collapse or transformation. No stagnation. No stalemates. Even their failures were productive. When humans lost, they didn't retreat, they learned. They didn't repeat mistakes. They revised them into future victories. Conflict, to them, was not pathology. It was process. The reason they had gone silent wasn't cowardice. It was saturation. The violence hadn't disgusted them. It had stopped being novel. And they had looked outward. Not to expand. To avoid relapse. That realization caused a deeper fear to take root in the old powers. The humans hadn't changed because they matured. They'd changed because they couldn't afford not to. They had chosen peace not as evolution, but as containment. Every trade pact, every cultural exchange, every alliance, they weren't acts of trust. They were measures of distance, barriers between the galaxy and the part of humanity they'd buried. And when someone stepped over the line, when the galaxy got too close to what humans were trying to forget, they didn't hesitate. The silence wasn't a reaction. It was a final layer of restraint. Now, the galaxy faced a paradox. The humans had proven they wouldn't tolerate systemic violence, but they had also shown no interest in ruling. They didn't demand territory. They didn't rewrite laws. They left systems to govern themselves. Inaction, to them, was the ideal state. The moment they had to act, someone had already failed. This created a strange reverence. No empire feared Earth's invasion. They feared its attention. One miscalculation, one unjust war, one sanctioned atrocity, and the galaxy now understood that humanity would appear, not to negotiate but to end, not to replace, just to stop. Galactic power realigned itself almost overnight. The largest military blocs began issuing universal disarmament initiative. Former warmongers rebranded as peace scholars. Even long-standing rivalries collapsed under the weight of shared anxiety. They weren't cooperating out of hope. They were aligning to avoid scrutiny. But there was a deeper transformation underway, something more subtle. Ideas began to shift. A new generation of tacticians began studying Earth warfare as something more than brutality. They treated it as mathematics, pattern recognition, cold application of force without cruelty. They saw it for what it was, not rage, not dominance, just resolution. Human warfare didn't waste. It calculated. And that terrified everyone. The Council secretly commissioned a simulation. A multi-species war game involving hundreds of battle scenarios. Every faction contributed data, strategies, and command doctrines. The goal was to run a test. If humanity chose to conquer, could anyone stop them? Not one simulation resulted in victory. Even when the humans were outnumbered, outgunned, isolated, they adapted. They built unconventional networks, turned enemies against each other, manipulated logistics, sabotaged morale. Their worst-case scenario? 1,000-year stalemate. At best, humanity would win in weeks. The Council quietly shelved the findings. But someone leaked the core data. It spread fast. And with it, a question. If humanity was this capable, why had they waited so long to act? The answer came not from humans, but from those who had seen their worlds spared. Refugees from the Dominion front lines began to talk. Stories emerged. Entire hospitals untouched. Civilian shuttles protected mid-flight. Human drones performing rescue operations during a bombardment. Infrastructure restored after a strike. Food distributed in retreat zones. This wasn't scorched earth. It was precision pain. Enough to break the war machine. Not enough to break the people. The message had never been about punishment. It was prevention. And the galaxy understood. Humanity didn't fear war. It feared its own version of war. If it came out again, no species would be safe. Not even humans themselves. So they mastered it. Isolated it. Buried it under decades of diplomacy, trade, and cultural obfuscation. They created art, music, literature, not to replace war but to weigh it down. To distract the younger generations. To reroute their instincts. It had worked for a time. Until the Dominion forced their hand. That was the last time anyone would. On the first solar cycle following the end of the human intervention, Earth issued one universal signal to the Council. It was simple, direct. A document less than 50 words. We are leaving the network. All current treaties stand. We require no assistance, no trade, no communication. Any act of aggression will be met with finality. We are done. The humans had exiled themselves. Voluntarily. They weren't waiting for the next war. They were preventing it. Earth went dark. Its colonies, once open to all, became closed systems. Automated, precise, peaceful. No visitors permitted. Human fleets vanished into untracked orbit. Human AIs refused all foreign input. The species had withdrawn into silence again, not from weakness, from clarity. They had nothing left to prove. And in that silence, the galaxy evolved. Leaders changed. Flags changed. Technology advanced. But the memory stayed. Every year, on the day of the Earth signal, sectors across the stars went quiet for 1 hour. No weapons were fired. No troops deployed. No deals brokered. They called it the silent hour. Not a holiday. A warning. The generation born after the correction, as it came to be known, viewed humanity not as heroes or villains, but as a threshold. A species that chose not to rule when it easily could have. A species that demonstrated power through absence. Some hated them. Some admired them. But no one challenged them. Because in the deepest part of galactic memory was a truth no one could erase. The humans had not fought a war. They had demonstrated what a war could look like, and left the stars with a choice. Continue as before and risk the return. Or evolve, and hope the silence continued. For now the silence held. But above every moon, every station, every throne, the same unspoken fear lingered. What happens if humanity stops believing in peace again? Because the last time they acted, they didn't come to conquer. They came to remind the galaxy what war really was. And if they come again, there may be no one left to remember.